Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so continuing our series on MCU villains, which is to say taking villains and rolling them over into the MCU, and honestly, we should just call it like MCU characters, since we'll probably start getting into heroes too. In this video, I want to be a little bit dangerous, and I want to talk about how to put Moon Knight in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but to do it as a villain. In the comics, Moon Knight's not really a villain. He's kind of an anti-hero. The problem is, with the exception of Jeff Lemire, nobody ever really did anything with Moon Knight that was stellar, right? I mean, nobody ever really like focused on any of the major issues that he dealt with. But the origin of Moon Knight deals with the idea that there was simply a guy named Mark Spector, right? And he worked for like the CIA. He was a former boxer, a former US Marine, and he was on an expedition working with a guy by the name of Peter Alraine and his daughter Marlene. Kind of a fun fact, on the way there, they were listening to Audible. Yes, this is a sponsored video, sponsored by Audible. So with Audible, every month you get 1 free audiobook and 2 free Audible originals from an ever-changing list. One of my favorites is actually World War Z by Max Brooks. If you guys never listened to it, it's actually pretty solid. It's basically this book that deals with like the history of the zombie war, but told from different people's perspectives. It's pretty solid. But Audible is pretty great if you're on the go, right? So like you're going to the beach, or you're going hiking, or you're going road tripping. I like it when I'm driving to the mountains, but go to audible.com/comicsexplained or text your code comicsexplained to 500 to get started. Amazon Prime members can actually get Audible for $4.95 a month for the first 3 months, which is like getting 3 months for the price of one. And after that, it's only $14.95 a month. And this offer ends on July 31st of 2019. So make sure you guys go to audible.com/comicsexplained or text comicsexplained to 500 to get started today. But getting back into Moon Knight, the way this story played out is that with, working alongside Dr. Alraine, really Peter and Marlene, we'll just go ahead and call them that. Working alongside Peter and Marlene, they had discovered this temple of sorts that was made in worship to the Egyptian god Khonshu. Now the issue with this was that around that time, they were all ambushed by a guy named Raoul Bushman, right? Raoul Bushman being an opportunist, used it to his advantage, and then of course he and Mark Spector got into a fight, and that led to Mark Spector being defeated and actually left for dead. And so following that, the worshippers of Khonshu came along and they brought Mark Spector to the statue of Khonshu, which in turn, really with Mark Spector more or less dying, had a kind of vision of sorts. Now, this is where things get kind of murky, right? Because with this vision, Khonshu basically says, I'll give you a second chance at life. All you have to do is be my avatar on Earth. And then of course, Mark Spector says yes, and he goes forward, intending to become a superhero. And so once he travels back to the US, what he does is he takes all the money that he made as a mercenary, and he in turn like channels it and really kind of funnels it into huge investments and builds himself a fortune, and then takes on the moniker of a millionaire named Steve Grant. But in order to be a superhero and to be on the ground level, he forms the identity of a guy named Jake Lockley, who's a cab driver. Now the issue with this is what it does is it actually kind of sends him into a tailspin of like schizophrenia. And that's one of the reasons why he's so cool, right? And it's one of the things that like writers never really seem to focus on. They kind of focus on him as like a character who's just there. He had his own solo run like for a while. He's never really been able to hold it very long. It's just kind of been like this run and then this run and then this run and then this run. It's not ongoing, right? It's not like Uncanny X-Men or Iron Man where it spans like 400 issues or anything like that. There's always an effort by Marvel to launch his own solo series. His core fan base reads it, nobody else does, but that fan base isn't big enough to maintain, a solo run, and so Marvel ends up canceling it. But if the Marvel Cinematic Universe does it right, what you're going to end up getting is this guy who's very Batman-esque, right? And like Moon Knight fans hate it when you compare him to Batman, but I mean, come on, like anybody with eyesight can tell like he's basically a pastiche of Batman. Like Batman has Patches Malone, Moon Knight has Jake Lockley, Batman's Bruce Wayne, like Moon Knight is Steve Grant. Like it's obvious, in terms of the character being a play on Batman. But the idea is that if he was thrown into the MCU and he was done well, it would say a few things. One, apparently Marvel, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, can make a better Batman than Warner Brothers, which would kind of suck. And two, it would go into this idea that they could develop a character beyond what we've seen so far, right? Because the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for the most part, is largely upbeat, right? I mean, like for the most part, all the movies are pretty upbeat. There's some serious movies, but there's not really any like dark movies, right? There's no movies out there that deal with things like the way Legion does on FX or anything like that. And that's not a bad thing. But in order for the MCU to really like thrive and survive well beyond these last 10 years, you're going to kind of need a more dynamic and a more diverse portrayal of heroes as they exist in Marvel Comics carried over to film form. And so if you take a character like Moon Knight and you basically say that by virtue of all these personalities that Mark Spector has essentially developed either schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder, and he doesn't really know which one's his actual personality, which one's real, then like it creates a whole new set of events, right? Because the schizophrenia comes into play in the question of, did Khonshu actually appear to him? Is he actually an avatar of Khonshu on Earth? That's one of the themes that was addressed during Jeff Lemire's run. Like, did it really happen, or is he just a crazy guy? And then the multiple personality comes into into play in which one was actually the person who was approached by Khonshu, if that actually happened. Was it Mark Spector? Was it Jake Lockley? Was it Steve Grant? Which one was it? And so it really kind of gets cool and murky when it comes to these waters. And when you take that idea and you throw it into the MCU, you can portray him as a villain. And you can basically say, this is a guy who, by virtue of his own past experiences or what have you, believes that he's the avatar of Khonshu. And going forward, he's not really a villain, I guess, straight up, so much as like an anti-hero, but he's extreme. Where the Avengers are like, hey, look, we have to stop this guy and then take him to the cops. Like, Moon Knight's fine with killing them. And so the result is that you end up having him come into conflict directly with like any of the Avengers. Now, in my mind, I actually think Moon Knight would make a better villain for like Daredevil or somebody like that, but they would have to roll Daredevil over into the movies, which, by the way, I think it's high time that we take Daredevil, like Matt Murdock, like we take him from what used to be the Netflix series, it's been canceled now, but from the Netflix series, and actually give him his own movie, because by God, like he's earned it, man. Like, dude, Daredevil was by like far and away the best of the series on Netflix. Punisher was cool, but I would give it to Daredevil. He needs to be in his own movie. But if they were to give Daredevil a movie and then they were to give him a villain, give him Moon Knight. It'd be a great way to introduce the character in, right? Because people are already going to be hyped about a Daredevil film starring Charlie Cox, and then they're going to be hyped about the possibility of like Moon Knight being thrown in, which even if they don't really know his origin, they know of him, and I think that's enough popularity to be able to like carry him through and at the very least get people's butts into the seats and to see the film. If not, word of mouth will take care of all that if it's done correctly. But you literally throw all these things in. This is a guy with schizophrenia, possible multiple personality disorder, and then he in turn is trying to become a hero. It seems like a crazy guy. And then like what you can kind of do, you can either answer the film, you can kind of end the movie with an absolute answer, right? And say, yes, he was visited by Khonshu. Yes, Mark Spector is the actual personality. Yes, he's a little bit lost in himself. And then almost take a page out of like Who is the Century from Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers run and have somebody sit down with Mark Spector or with Moon Knight and basically go through and kind of permeate through all the nonsense and say, here is who you actually are. You are actually Mark Spector. That's your actual name. You were a mercenary. You were working for the CIA. You were a U.S. Marine, and you were left for dead in the desert. And you were visited by Khonshu. That's a lot of words. But again, it can be done exceedingly well. And it can be done really, like, it can be super cool, because what you would have is this movie with a complex and dynamic character that doesn't take 3 movies in order to really develop and to build. But you have this complex and dynamic character who really toys with the first instance of an anti-hero in the films, right? Because in the movies, it's hero and villain, and that's it. It's like the Silver Age of comics in the 1960s. There's the good guys and the bad guys, and there's no difficulty in understanding which is which. In Netflix, it gets a little more hairy when you're talking about Jessica Jones versus Luke Cage versus Daredevil versus Danny Rand, and especially the Punisher. But with regards to the films, it's a lot more clear cut. You could introduce an element in there and say, hey, here's a good guy who sometimes does bad things. It'd be a great kind of precursor to like looking at the movie, developing Moon Knight as an anti-hero, seeing what sticks and what doesn't stick, and then apply that to Wolverine, right? Because I mean, Wolverine's an anti-hero. He's like the anti-hero in comic books. So it's a great way to put the character in there. I think putting him in as a villain is the best way to do it, because then what you can basically do is that once everything's all sorted out and it's all said and done, and assuming, for example, that they come back and they say, yes, he like that whole stuff about Khonshu is true, then he does become a hero, and that's that, right? He's just kind of in there, and he's like, all right, cool. He goes on to become a good guy. If they decide not to take that route, they still have a way out of the whole thing, right? They can say, well, no, he's just a crazy guy, is really all he is. Moon Knight fans would be pissed, but I think it would actually be kind of cool, right? I mean, I think it'd be kind of interesting. But literally just kind of pawn him off and say, yeah, he's a villain, and like now he's going away, and he's going to be put in like some prison somewhere, which gives the opportunity for him to come back, possibly reform his ways, and then become a good guy again, or become a good guy going forward. But there's a lot of things you can do with him, because really, we need somebody like Moon Knight in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We need someone who's one part crazy, one part anti-hero, and all part interesting. That sounds like a 1980s film thing, you know, one part hero, one part crazy, and one part everything else. I forgot what it was that I said before. But nonetheless, you guys understand what I'm saying. Like, the notion of just a good hero, like a good guy and a bad guy, wears thin really, really fast. You need someone who toys the line, someone who's a little bit murky, somebody whose actions are a little questionable, but they're always trying to do the right thing. So we just sort of shrug our shoulders, sweep it under the rug, and say, you know, I can let it slide. You know, that's kind of what we need in like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And we don't have that. Like, we don't have that at the moment. And I think that Moon Knight is an amazing way to bring that into the MCU. I mean, in my idea, start him out as a villain, turn him into a hero. It's a great way to kind of evolve and grow the character. And even if you don't do that in one movie, you can do it over the course of several movies, right? He's just kind of like this background theme or a character they face off against every once in a while and somehow keeps managing to escape. Whatever the case is, like, you basically turn him into a guy that can go on to become a future member of the Avengers team. So I think it'd be cool, and I think it'd be interesting. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.